A couple of reminders to please keep your mics muted until question and answer time so we don't get a lot of feedback. Jenny Pratt is going to start this morning, and then Patricia Garcia with OMES and Deidre O'Neill from the Treasurer's Office will be presenting. You should have received a PowerPoint probably by 2 different sources, maybe 3 different sources by now. So if you don't have that with you right away, you can see it here, and then it will be in your email boxes when you get back to your desk. It was sent out late yesterday evening. And also the payroll group is getting it just this morning, so I think that may have already been sent out. If you have not received the PowerPoint, please check with someone that's on the Council of Business Officers listserv, because that's how it was distributed. So someone there at your campus should have received that by now. Just a quick reminder that you will need to enter budget revisions. There are several that still have not entered your 7, 8, 9 budget revisions. So if you need help through that process, there were instructions that were sent out in an email on October the 2nd. If you need help walking through those instructions to get that entered, please call me. You can call me at 405-225-9201, and we can walk through that process with you, because those will be critical for your processing in January, and we don't want to wait until Christmas break and then find out that you don't have budget established and your payrolls for December and January are not going to process. So with that being said, we will have some question and answer periods where we'll ask you to unmute your mic, and I'm going to turn it over to Jenny Pratt with OMES to begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. First of all, good morning, and thanks for being with us today. I am Jenny Pratt. I'm the Director of Statewide Accounting with the Office of Management Enterprise Services, and also presenting today is Deidre O'Neill, who is the Director of Banking and Treasury Services with the Office of State Treasurer, and Patricia Garcia, who is the Statewide Accounts Payable Manager for the Office of Management Enterprise Services. In lieu of a roll call today, I'm going to ask that each institution send an email to Ayanna Wilkins listing the names and positions of the individuals that are attending today. We do need that so that we can provide for the security to be turned on to those individuals. Ayanna's email's been in most, if not all, of the presentations, other than this one. I didn't put it in this one. So you can find that on the website easily enough, or feel free to email any of us, and we'll make sure that that gets where it belongs. And I want to thank Sherry from Regents for hosting the session, and it's always great to be able to work with the Regents for higher education. We're really going to cover 3 areas in our training today. We're going to cover the ACES entry for your payroll tax payments. We're going to cover general ledger entry into the PeopleSoft system, and some accounts payable processing that needs to be covered. We will have time for questions at different points during the session, and we'll allow for questions at the end when the presentation is complete. If your question needs to be addressed by someone who's not here, we will take those down, and we'll make sure that responses are returned to you. So to start, what we have provided in the this slide, and we kind of cheated. This is what my group uses to document and the flow of their payroll processing, the payroll tax deposits. So this is a way that we have found to be efficient and effective to organize our payments on paper, to document them, and be able to record who did what when related to that payment. So once you've calculated your liability amount, you can enter on the top part of the screen, you can enter by detail the amount of the liability breakdown by account. In the next section, we provided an area to document the entry into the ACES system. This allows you to have the warrant number, which Deidre will address in her presentation, and other information on hand before you actually go into the system to make the payment. The last section is what we use to document our journal entries into general ledger, because just like you, we have to make those journal entries separately because we made the tax payment on the ACES system. You'll notice that each section has an area for who has done it, who has approved it. If necessary, you can modify this or use this. We'd be glad to make this available on the website if any of you are interested. or you can make your own sheet up to start your transactions. Deidre's going to cover the how to make the federal tax payments in ACES.
All right. So my portion is going to be a little brief because it's a bit of a repeat from what I presented in the August 19th session. But detailed written procedures for this process and the banking data maintenance will be made available to all of you prior to the next question and answer session. So I just wanted to make you guys aware of that. This first slide here is what you will see when you select the ACES main menu option from the Treasurer's Agency system. The only difference between this screen and what you will actually see is that you guys won't have the schedule check processing option. We're going to do that internally at OST once we have confirmation from OMES that you guys have made your journal entries and they match what you've entered in ACES. So let me see. So I'm going to move you on to the next slide here. Okay, and this is the screen that will be used to enter tax payments. So the first field is the warrant number, and this will be defined by your office. The warrant number can be up to 9 digits, and it cannot be used for the last 120 days by your agency on the 789 account. So that means that you can't use a warrant number that you use to issue a payroll item for your tax payment because they're both on the 789 account. So no reusing warrant numbers for 120 days. The effective date is the date the IRS will receive the payment in month, day, year format. This must be a valid effective date in the future. Payments can't be effective on holidays or weekends. The class ID is the next field, and I'm not really sure if you guys can see that screen very well, but it's kind of the second field down. And so the class ID for all federal tax payments is IRS. The next field is the amount. And in this field, you should enter your tax liability or your payment amount to the IRS. In the name field, you should always enter U.S. Treasury. And then the address, city, state, and claim number don't have to be completed. Those are not mandatory fields, and there's no value in entering those on these EFTs. You can enter additional details in the description field if you would like, and that'll just be for your records. There's an option to print a report later, and that would just show up on your report. But that won't be sent on your tax payment because these have to be formatted in a very specific way. The pay type for federal tax payment should always be E, and then the part ID will be your FEI number. Lastly, you'll enter your details related to the tax payment. The 5-digit tax type that you are paying belongs in the tax type field. The IRS has a list of valid tax types in the publication linked at the bottom of the screen. And then the next field is the period end date. This should be the period you're entering for in month, day, year format. The period end date corresponds to the reporting period. For example, if you're paying a 941 tax for the first quarter of 2016, the period end date would be 03/31/16. If you're paying multiple tax types, you will enter those tax types and the amounts that you are paying in subsequent fields. Once you have completed this screen, you will click the yellow diskette in the upper left-hand corner to save the payment. So I'm going to take you back to the previous screen real quick. You can also go into check listing once you have entered that payment and saved it, and that'll allow you to generate a report that you can save for your records. So I just wanted to also tell you about that option because I didn't really include it in my slides. But check listing generates a nice little PDF, tells you what the tax payment amount is, when it's scheduled to when it's the effective date, and all of that. So if you want a PDF for your records, that's how you can get one. I'm going to hand things back over to Jenny, who's going to talk about journal entries and timing and that type of thing. Oh, one last thing, sorry. These are the forms that you'll need to get access to the Treasurer's system. So as you're aware, these forms are due to us by November 16th. And the first form is the online user access form. So we just need your basic information at the top of the form, name, email address, phone number, that type of thing. And if you don't have access to our system, you'll just leave the user ID field blank. And then on this screen, you'll just need to say, or on this form, you'll just need to say yes next to ACES. And then on attachment B, you'll just need to say yes to AC21, which means that you'll have ability to enter payments in the Treasurer's Agency system. And then you'll also need to enter your 789 account number So that's your 7-digit account number. So if you're from OU, it would be 7789760. So you'll just need to enter that in the from account and then have this signed and sent to us from your CFO. And then we'll get your access set up. We're expecting to have all these forms back to us by November 16th. So again, I'll hand it back over to Jenny.
Okay, so we're going to go over a little bit about the timing on making the deposits, because this is very critical to avoid penalties with the IRS. And so we want to ensure that we're very clear on when these things have to be completed. So after you've entered your tax payment in the ACES system, you're going to need to create a journal entry in PeopleSoft General Ledger System to record that payment. That entry must be completed no later than 10 a.m. on the day before the tax payment is due to the IRS. So if your tax payment's due on Friday, by 10 o'clock on Thursday, you have to have that journal entry entered, and you have to have notified us in order for that to be released to pay on time. The GL and ACES entries can be made in advance, and that's what I would anticipate most will do. So if you've processed your payroll and it's payable on Friday, you can go ahead and calculate your tax payment on Monday. You can go to the ACES system, you can schedule your payment, or you can enter your payment, and then you can do the journal entry into the general ledger system and send all of the information in. We will go ahead and edit and post your journal entry, and we will release that to the treasurer the day that it's submitted to us. Now, they will not release the payment to the IRS until your scheduled effective date. So just be aware that usually your best option is to do it early rather than waiting until the last day to make that payment. So once we've entered all of that, the payment will go on the date it's scheduled. The journal entry will have posted into the general ledger system. By 10:45 each day, we will notify the treasurer of any journal entries that have been posted and the amounts for the universities, and they will, by 11, go into the system and complete the scheduling for the payment to the IRS. So those are very important deadlines. If you're coming in at 10:30 and we've already released it at 10, you need to make sure somebody knows about it. Number one, you shouldn't do it. But number two, we understand it happens. So you need to make sure that if you have not met the deadline, because we don't know when you're going to make payments. We don't know to look for a payment from this university and that university. We are only scheduling the ones that we have gotten in the system. So it is very important that you meet those deadlines. And I believe that, were we going to talk about how they can review the scheduled payments?
So you have the ability to go out in the system. So afternoon or 1 o'clock on the day that the payment has been entered, you have the ability to go back out here. And if you go into the check detail maintenance screen and your payment's still here and it's still out here, that means that we haven't released it. So something was wrong with either we didn't get your journal entry, we weren't notified from OMES for one reason or another that your payment was entered, and so we don't know to release it because that's the only way we know is from the notification we get from OMES. So it's kind of recommended that you come out here the afternoon of the day that you do the journal entry, of the morning you do the journal entry, and check and see if your payment's still out here. Because if it is, that's a red flag, and you need to be contacting my office and OMES so we can determine what we need to do to get your payment released by its liability date. So.
And this is just some more information. Once we get the journal entries from the agencies and the email from the agencies, we will review those journal entries for the proper account, class, fund, department, program code, and BUDREV. We will make sure that the dollar amount on that entry matches the screenshot that you're going to send us from the ACES system. And we'll go over later what you will send with that email. If everything's in agreement, we're just going to release that to the treasurer. You will not get a notification that we've released it. You will get a notification if it's not in agreement. we will be contacting you, and we'll again ask for several contacts when you send that email in, because of the criticality of the timing on this. We want to make sure that if we get one that's not in agreement, and we try to call Sue and say it's not in agreement, if Sue's not there, we don't want to drop it. We want to call someone else. So we want to help you as much as possible with that. And then, of course, when OST processes them, they are also going to make that agreement, because they want to ensure what's still in the system is what we saw and what our journal entry's for. Otherwise, we're going to have our books completely out of balance. And so they're going to verify those amounts as well. And if they're in agreement, they'll schedule it. If not, they'll be contacting the agency. And so that's why it's important that we have some good contact information. Find the right button. So on to the actual journal entry processing. The screenshot I provided here is actually one of the PFTs that was processed into our system as a test. And I just selected certain lines out of that PFT to demonstrate here. And when you're actually looking at the printed copy, I'm sure it can be read easier. But this highlighted in the box is the amounts that you're actually going to be scheduling for payment. So I just wanted to provide that on the front end. This actually came when you processed your PFT. Our system created a journal entry, and I have filtered it and sorted it to get to where you can just see what you needed to see for what we're doing today. So to make the journal entry for the employment taxes to the IRS, you will need to log on to the PeopleSoft system using your journal ID that ends with a JE. Most agencies already have at least one person with that type of a journal entry access, but they're doing their clearing account entries. If you're going to have someone else doing that entry, those people will need to get their own user ID with a separate login. And so if you're logging in and it doesn't end with a JE, you will not be able to process the transactions. Pardon? Okay, so to get the JE access, you'll fill out the Form 301 JE. I believe it was put onto the project website where all of the data is. That form is out there. Okay, so if you have submitted your form and you have not been notified that your access is there, that's because they have not turned on security. And after today, when we get the emails back from the people that have attended, we'll notify security, and they will go ahead and turn on your journal entry access. You don't really need it until you make a tax payment, but there's not really much you can do with it other than make journal entries that we have to delete out of the system. So if you have not completed the 301 JE, go ahead and do so as soon as possible. I'd recommend that you have at least, usually more than one person that has that access. So if someone's on vacation and you've got to make a tax payment, somebody's got to have access to make that into the system. So we do recommend that you have multiple people. As I said, you already have someone that does that for your clearing account. Now, they won't know what to make on your journal entry here, but they do have the access to help you with that. When you log on, you'll go to the menu item that's noted on the screen. I would recommend, since this is the only thing you can do under this user ID, is to make the journal entry. That's all you can do. Go ahead and put it in favorites so you don't have to navigate all the way through the system again. If you have any questions about that, we can go over that later. Oops, did I go to? Once you navigate to the system, you'll get a screen that is to add a new journal entry. It should default into the Add a New Value tab. It should default your business unit. If you have multiple business units that you'll be doing this for, you make sure that you have the correct business unit there. It will default the current date, and it will default next into the journal ID. Do not change the next, and the system will assign the journal ID. And do not future date this entry. We cannot post future dated entries. So if you enter your tax payment for Friday and you think, I need to make this entry for Friday, we won't be able to post it. We won't be able to release it, and your tax payment won't be made on time. So now we're not going to just drop you. We're going to call you and say, we've got a problem. But you need to be aware that you need to leave the journal date as it exists, because we cannot post future dated entries. And from the screen, then all you'll do is click the Add button to create your journal entry. Once you've selected the Add button, you'll go to the header page of the journal entry. You'll need to enter a description, and I've entered something in there. I recommend that you make your description meaningful to you, to record the federal tax payments for PFT numbers 1, 2, 3, or whatever that you're making those for. Now, you will only do one tax payment and one journal entry. They will have to be 1-to-1. So if you have multiple PFTs you've done that all have the taxes due on the same day, you'll probably want to put all of them on the same entry, because you won't want to schedule 3 payments through the treasurer's office and make 3 journal entries. If you are on a 1-to-1 basis, in addition to the description field, the reference number field, you can put the last 5 digits of the PFT in there. The reason I recommend that is the PFT entry is putting the last 5 digits of the PFT in that reference number. And if you put the corresponding tax payment with the same PFT number there, as you're trying to reconcile this account, you can query the system and get that reference number off the PFT journal ID and off of the tax payment journal ID and reference that they're in agreement. If you're doing multiple PFTs on one tax payment, you'll have to rely on the description field, because we do not have a place to put multiple references on the journal ID. Additionally, on the journal class, you will need to put OSF. That is just a code that tells us this entry is to stay in our system only. We're not going to pass it to the treasurer, because we pass the majority of our entries to the treasurer and they post them in their side. They've already posted them from the ACES system, so you don't want them posting them again, because that could be a significant decrease in your cash. So make sure you have the journal class of OSF on there. Do not change any of the other defaults. In most cases, it won't let you change a lot of them, but do not change any of the other defaults, as those are what we're writing our queries for. And that's if we're going to give you queries to help you reconcile. And if you change the defaults, that could change, the queries won't work properly. After the journal header is complete, you'll click the Lines tab on the top of the page to take you to where you actually enter your payment. Once you're on the Lines tab page, I've given you a screenshot that shows you can personalize this page. When you first go there, it's going to be very wide, because it's going to have all the chart fields that you're eligible to use in there, or it's going to have a lot of them. And I would recommend that you personalize that page to include only the chart fields that you're going to use for your journal entry. It's only going to personalize it for this user ID. It won't affect anything else you do in PeopleSoft with another user ID. And the reason I suggest that is you don't want to be scrolling back and forth all the time, and most people would rather see everything on one page. And so I have shown you on the next screen to personalize it. You would click the Personalize button. I've already personalized this one, but you will click on the chart field you want to hide, and you can hold your Control key down and select many of them, and then click the Hidden button. Once you do that, you can either preview it and see what it looks like, see if there's anything else you want to remove, or you can just hit the OK button and it will save it. If you've saved it and you've taken one off you need back, just go back through Personalize, click it, and unhide it. And you will unhide it by clicking the Hidden button again. It just reverses the status. So once you've made those changes to the personalizations, of course that is personal preference there, you'll go back to your lines page. The journal lines page will always open with only one line, one input line. The only thing on that input line when it opens will be your business unit, and that's carried from what was on the header when you added the entry. You can go in and add one line at a time by the lines to add. Typically the default on lines to add is 1, and you can hit the plus key and add one line at a time as you want it. Or you can go in and increase the number of lines. If you, in this case, I knew I was going to enter 6 lines. So I entered the first line. I changed the lines to add to 5. And the reason I entered the first line is some of these will carry down and default into your future lines. If you add lines before you have data in the chart fields, the next lines will always be blank. So I went ahead and added the first row in the entry. In the first row, I made the entry to the 585110, and this is, if we go back, whoops, too many. If we go back to this screen, the 585110 corresponds to the line highlighted in gray. When it comes into your 789, it will come in as a 485110. When you make the journal entry, we'll change the 4 to a 5. The journal entry will not process with a 4. You will reverse the signs because it comes in as a credit to the account, and you will make your journal entry as a debit to the account, and with the appropriate department, class, and program chart field. Just make sure that you do reverse those signs. Otherwise, you will not be creating the proper tax entry, and we will have to send that back. So once I've created my lines, you can see here that it copied down the class and the fund type. And I'm a real fan of not keying anything I don't have to key. So I'm going to always copy my lines down after I've filled in the first one so that I don't have to key those additional chart fields. So you will go ahead and complete this, complete the remaining entry to correspond with the tax payment that you're making, with the last line being an offset to your cash. Now, one thing I will note is that on the first screen that we showed you, they put cash first and then put everything else second. It doesn't make any difference. Your cash can be first or it can be the last line. It makes no difference. It just has to be balanced to cash. And cash must always be a negative. Once those lines are entered, the entry can now be saved. When you save the entry, you will probably get an error that said this is in a incomplete status and can't be edited until it's changed. That's okay. Just pass through that entry. Go ahead and save it. It's just a warning that says it's in a temporary status. Once you've passed through that, you will get a journal entry that has your debits and credits totaled on it. Verify that your total debits equal your total credits, and make sure that the amount in your total screen agrees with your tax entry that you made in the treasurer's office. That's part of what we're going to look for. One thing to note, if you added additional lines and you don't need them, you can go over and select the line on the left-hand side of the page and select the line that you don't need, and you can click the minus key down below the lines to delete unneeded lines. I would recommend you delete those if you have extra ones. So, and that's it. That's the journal entry. I drug it out as long as I could. So let's just summarize where we're at on federal tax payments, and then we'll take some questions. So to summarize, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to calculate your tax deposit by account. You do need it by account to be able to reconcile your 789 fund. You're going to enter the payment into the ACES system. You're going to enter the journal entry into the financial system, and then you're going to notify DCAR Accounting for approval. The email that you're going to notify, I failed to get in the screens, but we will put it on the website. It's accounting at omes.ok.gov. We will put that on the website for you. When you notify us, make sure it's before 10 o'clock the day before the payment's due. Earlier is always better. Send an email to that address. It will go to about 6 or 7 people. So we want to make sure somebody's there that's going to monitor it. And I will make sure somebody's assigned to do that every day. Include in the email your agency number, a couple of contacts, the journal ID, and the screenshot from the ACES system. Because we need to see, we can't get into your ACES system. We need to see what you have in there to approve that journal entry. So, and then next, we're going to look at that journal entry. We're going to make sure that it's in balance. We're going to make sure that the header information is appropriate. We're going to look to that you use proper accounts, class, fund, all of the chart fields. One thing I want to note, we are not checking that your amount is the correct amount of your tax payment. We don't know that. Nor are we checking to make sure that each account is the correct amount related to a PFT, because we're not going to have that data readily available. So if you combine several PFTs and put that into one journal entry, we're not going to go out and run those PFTs down, and we're not going to check every account number that you used is correct. That is up to you to do, and that will only benefit you to make sure that you can reconcile your 789 account. And once that's done, we presented some of this earlier, but I thought it was good to repeat. Once that is done, we will either approve or reject the entry. And if everything's correct, we will send everything to the treasurer's office for them to schedule the payment. If the amounts do not agree, we'll be notifying you. And then OST will, as soon as we have notified them, we'll go in and do a release of those payments to the banking system. And they, again, will also balance the amount in the ACES system to what's in our email. So we're going to have to be very careful. One other point, I'll stress again, make sure if you haven't done your journal entry forms to go ahead and get those, the journal entry screen access forms, security, to go ahead and get those into us. And I think we'll pause here before going to Patricia and take any questions.
So you guys have, you all have, the deadline for the forms is November 16th, as we said, but we're not setting up any access until we get all of the forms. And so there's a week and a half period that we've given our security team to set all those up. So it should be before the 1st of December that you guys get your user IDs and passwords if you don't already have them. If you do already have ACES access, then you'll see that new account number added around the first week of December. Any other questions?
Tulsa, yes, this is Colleen at Tulsa Community College. Which screen off ACES do you want a screenshot of? Do you only want the first one, or do you want the scheduled check processing screen also?
Well, you won't have access to the scheduled check processing screen like you do whenever you send Vicki the wires information.
Okay.
So we would only, or Jenny would only want the check detail maintenance screen.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
This is Kim Andrade from Redlands
Just
Community College.
a second. We have whoever's on the line, hold. We've got another question in the room.
Federal tax payments are due, because you keep saying to make sure we do it by they're due. I don't know when they're due.
Okay, we don't know when your tax payments are due either. That is something the agencies, each institution will have to determine when their tax payments are due. The information for that, I believe Lisa Rail gave you some links to some IRS, training, as well as some publications for when those tax payments are due. That's not going to be standard for all universities. So your payments may be due weekly. They may be due bi-weekly. They may be due twice a week. It depends on your volume as to when your payments are due. we can't really tell you when that is. So, if you have questions about where to get that information, I'll forward those to Lisa Rail and we can help you with that. So if you want to send to Ayanna Wilkins your questions about where do you get information about when your tax payments are due, she will go ahead and forward that to Lisa and you'll get a response. Okay, we had somebody on remote.
Okay, this is Kim Andrade from Redlands Community College. Jenny used the example of the payday being on Friday and then that following Monday going in and doing the ACEs and the journal entry. Do we have to wait until after the actual payday, or once we have all the payrolls done, can we go ahead and do that immediately after?
In most cases, you will do it in advance of payday. So
Okay.
when our payday is Friday, we do it the Monday before, so that it's scheduled. It depends on when your payment is due. So if you're
Okay.
in, the state is large enough that our payments are due next day. So most state agencies still pay monthly. So the last day of the month is a payday. Our payments are due on the first day after payday. But that depends based on the size of your agency and the amount of your payment. The IRS should give you, when you set up your federal ID number, they should give you, because you give them an estimated payroll, they should give you whether you're a monthly or a weekly or a daily depositor.
And just a reminder, you can schedule those ACES payments in advance, but not the journal entry. So, if you wanted to go out there and enter your tax payment on Monday in ACES and it's not due till Friday, that's totally fine. And just get ahead of the game. So
Now, what? You can't go ahead and enter the journal entry?
You can enter the journal entry. Okay, so if your tax payment is due on Friday, you can go in on Monday, you can schedule the ACES payment, and you can do the journal entry. What Deidre is referring to is do not future date that journal entry.
Oh, okay.
Leave it dated Monday, because when you send us the email that it's out there and we go in and approve it, we cannot approve it and post it if it's future dated. So any other questions from, and we'll take questions at the end as well.
Question, Jenny. Just curious at OMS, how's your distribution of work? Who does the federal tax payment processing versus the journal entries? I mean, is it all in the accounting area? Is accounts payable get involved with it or what?
In our case, that is all done by my payroll group, Lisa Rail, Jean Hayes, and Beth Brox. They calculate, and they internally, one of them will calculate the payment, another one will review it, and that person might also make the journal entry. They have access to do all of that.
So all that's basically payroll.
That's all in my payroll group. There is really no accounts payable. The only accounts payable would be the payments that are not federal tax payments. Yeah, you can go on to yours. So, is there any other question quickly?
If you end up voiding a check and you've already made your tax deposit, do you just adjust the next tax deposit?
Yes, if you have a check that is issued and you've made your tax payment for that check, and then that check ends up being canceled. When you cancel that check, you're going to do a reverse PFT to take that money back to the source, and that money will no longer be in your 789 to pay. We will not allow you to pay it out of your 789 if it takes it negative. So, just for ease of purposes, say you have $10,000 of tax dollars in 789, and you void a check that had $1,000 worth of taxes. When you process that PFT reversal through the system, the balance in 789 is only going to be $900, and that's all you'll pay to the feds.
Okay, so you're going to be able to actually track within 789 how much of the money was for federal tax, state tax, all that type of stuff. So if there's any changes in that amount, you'll know it.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the PFT has the detailed account numbers, the 485 numbers. There's one for federal tax, for employees FICA, for employers FICA, for employees Medicare, for employers Medicare, for state tax withholding, as well as all the rest. And the corresponding 585 accounts are the exact same account numbers with the 5 at the front. So that should help you in reconciling those accounts. So if we don't have any other questions, we're going to move on to Patricia.
All right, thank you, Jenny. All right, in this last section, the accounts payable discussion is going to consist of when and how the payroll vouchers will be created after the PFT and the 500 miscellaneous files are loaded and approved. I'm going to refer to these as the net payroll vouchers. We're going to discuss the values that will populate in these certain voucher fields, and we're going to take a look at one of the net payroll vouchers that we use during testing. We're also going to discuss the net payroll warrants. For those of the warrants that don't cash, they may be returned, they may be canceled, they may be stat canceled, those sorts of things. So since the miscellaneous warrant procedures are going to apply to these payroll warrants, and they do differ from the processes that are currently used for the current payroll warrants. Included in the discussions are EFT returns, the process to cancel the warrants associated with the PFT reversals, payroll reversals, and the appropriate forms to use to reissue the lost or destroyed warrants and warrants canceled by statute. We're also going to take a look at the other vouchers recorded to the 585 accounts that will be transmitted through the vouchers from remote agency interface to pay the taxes other than the federal withholding taxes, pension payments, state share expenses, and voluntary and involuntary deductions. The tax and pension liabilities are currently being paid centrally by OMES today, and the state share and deductions are paid with the Class Fund 994 vouchers. Since the institutions will pay these payments with the Class 789 fund vouchers, we're going to compare important differences between the 7XX, the 789, and the 994 class funds. These differences will require agencies to be proactive in reconciling the 789 fund timely, submit stat cancel payments to unclaimed property, and understand the requirements for transmitting these vouchers. Lastly, we're going to discuss some changes that we are in the process of making to change certain accounts payable reports. All right, so as far as the net payroll vouchers, after the institutions upload the PFT and 500 misfile, they run the validate PFT fund report and they submit it with the necessary documentation to OMES transaction processing. There's going to be batch processes that are going to be run after Elsa Cannell and Catherine Edge approve that total claim cost and those PFT net payments. These batch processes will create the journal entry that will provide the cash budget. They will also create the file that's going to be sent to OST, and they're going to create these net payroll vouchers. The processes will also budget check the vouchers, and they're going to create the accrual entries. The vouchers will be available to review in PeopleSoft in the next day. So those batch processes are going to be run in the evening. The supplier ID that we're going to be using for both the HECLM and for the OU Health Science Center that's on the set IDL zeros vendor file is going to be 6 leading zeros and 1111. So in the future, when I refer to that supplier ID, I'm just going to call it 1111. And it's going to have a description of higher ed payroll. We are going to be retaining the employee's name that's going to be coming through that 500 misfile in our payment table, but you're not going to be able to see it on the actual vouchers. So it's not going to display there, but we will be maintaining that. And we're going to be doing that for reconciliation purposes and also for confirmation purposes, or when we get paperwork either to cancel warrants or to reissue them. The invoice ID on the claim is going to be the claim number plus the record number. So the claim number that's entered in the online screen, for those of you who may have already been testing to upload the PFT and the 500 misfile, does not include the 2-digit BUD reference number that's at the beginning of the claim number, but that is going to be included in the invoice number on the voucher. The voucher accounting date will be the date the batch processes run, and it will be prior to your invoice and payment date, since both of these dates are going to be the payroll pay date. Since the payment dates are future dated, the payment entries will not be generated until the pay date. So it's similar to what Jenny was speaking about in her journal entries. They can't post until they're future dated. It's the same with the voucher. So with the payment date being future date with the pay date, those payment entries will not be generated until that date. Meaning that if you are looking at your summary receipts and disbursements report, that report's going to show the sum of the accrual entries as a liability in the change in liability column until the payment entries are made. The expenditure distribution line on the voucher will record the net payroll to the account code 585060 to offset the 485060 that came in with the PFT file. It's going to be, of course, to the class fund 78900, the department 889000001, program code C0103, and then the above ref indicated on the 500 MIS file. The warrant number submitted in the miscellaneous 500 file will populate in the voucher and will begin with 2. We suggest that you begin your sequence with a low number to allow for many warrant numbers. So, for example, this is a 9-digit number. It's better to start with a beginning warrant number of 200000001 rather than maybe 2100000001. All right, so here's an example of an invoice information page from the voucher that we took from a voucher that was created during testing. And I've highlighted some of the fields that we just spoke about. So if you'll notice on the invoice number there, that is the claim number. It begins with the BUDREF 16, has the business unit number, their claim number, and then the record number. The accounting date here, we processed this on October 28th, and so that was the date then of the accounting date on the voucher. Notice to the invoice date to the left there has the 10/30. That's because the payroll date was October 30th, or the pay date. And so that's what's going to populate. Supplier ID, notice there you got the 1111 number with that higher ed payroll as the description. And then at the bottom, you have the voucher distribution line with those chart fields as described, with the account number then is 585060. So all of these net payroll vouchers are going to build or create with that account number. The class fund 78900, the department ID, the 8900001, the BUDREF, whatever you send in with your 500 MIS file, and then the program code of C0103. All right, here's the example of a payments page in that same voucher. So again, the invoice date number and invoice date, both the same dates that came from the invoice information page. Notice my remit to is still 1111. So you do not see the payee name anywhere on the voucher, although we are maintaining it so that we can determine who is actually the payee for in case we need to reissue to the actual employee. If we do reissue to the employee and it's not stat canceled, we will be reissuing off of the same voucher, and at that point there will be a second payment row, and that will show then the payment of the employee, since that check has to be actually made out to the employee, and we will be discussing that at more length later. Notice there that I've got the higher ed payroll as my description. The method for all of these vouchers it's going to show as manual payment, whether you sent the treasurer instructions to make it as a check or an EFT. Here in PeopleSoft, they'll all be as manual. Down there you see the payment date of 10/30, and then the reference number then that was submitted by this particular agency, beginning with the 2. This was the 542nd voucher then that was created when they sent in this test file. All right, so now we've got the vouchers with all the payments and the warrant numbers, but sometimes those checks don't get cashed or they get returned. So with the net payroll EFT returns, Sometimes banking institutions return the EFT payments for different reasons, just like you do today, like you already experienced today with your payroll warrants. One of the most common reasons being that the account holder has closed the account. So currently, when OST notifies OMES that a receiving depository financial institution has returned an item, OMES issues a payroll replacement check. This will no longer be the process. Instead, the process for the miscellaneous warrant EFT returns will be used. The funds will be placed in the institution's clearing account, and Jeanette Pasher or Catherine Edge from our office will send an email requesting that the institution issue a refund check from the clearing account to the employee. Lisa Rail is going to be providing a list of all the payroll contacts for transaction processing to email. But we'll probably also copy our financial contact to ensure that the refund warrant does get done timely. If anybody has different instructions than that for us, then you would probably just need to contact me or Steve Wilson, and we'll make sure that we update our contact list. Brenda, you have a question?
We've never issued checks from our clearing account. How do we go about that?
All right, so Brenda's saying that she's never issued checks from her clearing account. Since we have Deidre here, I think I'm going to let her answer.
Okay. So that's something that you can do through ACES. And you can send in the same ACES forms that we just showed you earlier, just instead of the 789 account, and put your clearing account. And we'll get the process started so you can actually issue checks out of ACES. And we'll get that going right now. And then you can just give me a call, and I'll walk you through the process. It's very simple, but it's just the same as what we just went through. But instead of an E-type transaction for EFT, you do a P, and it generates a paper check for you.
Okay, so call you and you'll walk me through it.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so now let's say that we've got a voucher, we've got the check, you've got your entries, and now you determine that you need to do a PFT reversal. How is that going to affect the net payroll voucher? So if a payroll fund transfer reversal needs to be done, Lisa Rail tells me that she always instructs that an EFT or a warrant cancellation should be done first in order to ensure that those funds are returned. And she said unless the PFT reversal is being done due to an adjustment of a payroll amount. If the payment was an EFT, then you're going to submit the form EWC rather than the PWC to reverse that payment to the account 7789 AGY, where AGY is the institution's agency number. The same NACHO rules that apply to the PWC also apply to the form EWC, which means that you must submit this to the OST, or you're going to submit it first to our office, and then we will submit it to OST within 5 days of the effective date. Section 2 on the form requires that the receiver's name and vendor ID be populated. The receiver's name is going to be the employee name, even though that's not what's on the voucher, but it needs to, OST needs to know the actual employee name, and the vendor ID then is going to still be the 1111. OMES will verify that the payee's name agrees with the employee name maintained in the PeopleSoft payment table before we send that form on to the OST. All right, 5 days after OST forwards the form to JP Morgan Chase, OMES then will cancel the warrant in PeopleSoft provided the receiving depository financial institution does not notify us that the funds will not be returned. If the payment was made with a warrant, then you're going to submit the OST stop payment and hard cancel form with the warrant. And you'll need to complete section 1. You're going to check the hard cancel box and enter the employee's name rather than the vendor ID 1111's description in the payee name field. OMES then will still verify that that name agrees to the employee name that we are maintaining. And then you will complete section 2A. And that first column in the section indicates whether the warrant type is payroll or miscellaneous. So now, once it becomes a net payroll voucher, that is going to be marked as a miscellaneous type. You will also enter the voucher number, the amount, and N in the replace warrant column. And I do have a print screen of that form here in the next couple slides. If the employee is to get paid, then a new PFT transfer and the 500 misfile would be submitted for the reissuance. All right, once a net payroll warrant that has been canceled, then the PFT reversal will be necessary to move the funds recorded to the class 789 back to the operating funds. The PFT reversal process can also be used for the adjustment of payroll amounts, such as the employee was overpaid and paid back the net amount now that the agency doesn't owe the full taxes and deductions, etc. All right, Lisa Rail is currently working with our developers to create the PFT reversal process in financials, and she says that is going to be similar to today's process. She is proposing a PFT reversal checkbox be included on the load HE PFT and 500 miss online screen that I've got here on the PowerPoint, and there where I've got the box highlighted, that's where she is proposing that there's going to be a little checkbox for that PFT reversal. So this will be the only time that a PFT and the 500 misfile will not tie, since there will not be a 500 misfile. Once this functionality is developed, we will be asking the institutions to test it. So we're going to be sending out notifications and instructions once this is ready to test. So this was just something that we were not able to develop in time for the October 28th date to start testing. For a lost or destroyed warrant, if a net payroll warrant is lost or destroyed and is not canceled by statute and needs to be replaced, then you're going to submit the OST stop payment and hard cancel form. All the appropriate sections must be completed. If the warrant is lost or destroyed so that it no longer exists, then a stop payment must be requested. If a warrant is mutilated, but enough of the warrant does exist to where the warrant number is legible and we know that it is the warrant, then Section 1 information is still needed, but you don't need to request the stop payment. Although we rarely see this, it should be attached with the form. Additionally, the employer's name rather than the vendor ID of 1111 description should be entered in the payee's name field, and OEMS, again, will still verify that that payee's name agrees with the employee name maintained in our payment tables. The first column in Section 2A again indicates whether the warrant type is payroll or miscellaneous, and these net payroll vouchers then will be marked as miscellaneous warrants. You will also enter the voucher number, the amount, and why in the replace warrant column. Section 2B will also need to be completed to obtain the employees and notary signatures in order to replace the warrants, and the warrant replacement will be to the payee form. Will be to the payee from the all zero vendor file. So Section 2C will need to include the employee's name, the warrant amount, and the vendor ID and location for the employee. If the employee does not have a vendor ID in the all zero vendor file, then you need to submit the additions/changes for employees form to vendor maintenance. You can use the query OSF vendor check to determine if an employee is or is not included in the state's vendor file. We will reissue from the same voucher that was already created, as I mentioned before. So here's the print screen of the OST stop payment and hard cancel form separated into two print screens with the boxes mentioned in the previous slides highlighted in red. I realize that the print screens are small and may not be easily read, but I have included the link to the DCAR forms where the link to this form can be found. So you're all using these forms today, but I just wanted to point out some things that are just a little bit different. So there with the payee's name, the voucher is going to show that 1111 number. It's not going to have the name on it, so the payroll personnel are going to have to be able to supply that name in order to fill out this form so that we know who we're actually replacing this to. Over to the right, in Section 2A, that first box, it asks you if the warrant type is payroll or miscellaneous. That's where you're going to be entering miscellaneous, even though these are payroll related. All right, there you're going to replace the warrant there. It's got the yes or the no there, so you're going to enter yes. And then, of course, you'd have to fill out that second section that has all the payee, the employee signature notarized. And then in the reissue of the warrant there, that's where we'd want the vendor name and the vendor ID and location. That has to be in the state's vendor file in order for us to reissue. So actually, I think I'm incorrect there. It's actually going to be, I'm sorry, but I have been mistaken about that. That is still going to be, since we're reissuing from your vouchers, then it is going to be the vendor ID and location that is in either the HECLM or the all-zero file then. So you should already have it if you've already included that in the vendor file. All right, so if the warrant has stamp canceled, then you're going to submit the Form 20R. It's going to be similar to today's processes. But instead of the payroll warrant type, again, it's going to be the miscellaneous warrant type. The payee will be the employee's name and the vendor ID and the location for the employee. OEMS will again still verify that the payee's name agrees with the employee's name maintained in the PeopleSoft payment table. Okay, so this is where the warrant replacement will need to be made from the all-zero vendor file because we are issuing out of the stat cancel fund, and that business unit that we use does use the all-zero vendor file. If the employee does not have the vendor ID in the all-zero file, again, the same processes and procedures we just discussed still apply. You'll submit the additions/changes for employee form to vendor maintenance. And again, you can use that query OSF vendor check to determine if an employee is or is not included in the state's vendor file. We will include the replacement information on the original voucher in the same manner as we do today with the miscellaneous warrants. All right, so now what we're going to do is talk about the other vouchers that are going to be recorded to the account codes 585XXX in the 789 class fund. All right, today tax and pension liabilities are currently being paid centrally by OMES, and the state share and voluntary and involuntary deductions are paid with the class fund 994 vouchers. These payments, other than the federal withholding taxes, will be paid by the class fund 789 vouchers and will be transmitted through the vouchers from remote agency interface. So here I've included a grid of the account descriptions that will be submitted in the voucher interface with the corresponding 585XXX account codes and their prior codes. Those that begin with account code 2 in the prior account column are paid centrally, and those with the 633XXX account codes are paid with the 994 class fund vouchers. All these transactions will be paid with the 5X5 or 5A5XXX accounts beginning with the calendar year 2016 payroll. It is important to use the correct account codes. They were designed so that the 585XXX account codes offset the corresponding 485XXX account codes submitted in your PFT file. This is going to be helpful when reconciling, especially when there are timing differences. Since institutions will pay these payroll-related payments with Class 789 fund vouchers, we're going to be comparing important differences between the 7XX, 789, and 994 class funds. Although the 789 vouchers begin with 7, they do not have the same attributes as the 7XX vouchers. First, the 7XX vouchers are used to record ASA expenditures, but the 789 vouchers are not expenditures. The payroll expenditures were recorded in the PFT fund, and the 789 is acting as a clearing account. Another primary difference is that when the 7XX vouchers stat cancel, the money is returned to the agency. Now, I do apologize, but I've entered some information incorrectly onto this PowerPoint. I've got a couple things here backwards. So again, the 7XX vouchers, they do stat cancel. The money is returned to the agency. The status in PeopleSoft is canceled, and the 789 vouchers will stat cancel, and the funds will be placed into the stat cancel fund. The status in PeopleSoft on these 789 vouchers is going to be escheated. Institutions will be responsible for either reissuing from the stat cancel fund or sending the funds to unclaimed property. The 994 vouchers, budget check without department ID, and the class fund has been allowed to go into a deficit position. In 789, the vouchers are going to be subject to the same budget checking rules as the operating funds, meaning that there must be a class fund, a department ID, and the bud ref on the vouchers, and there must be adequate cash. The 789 vouchers will fail budget checking if there's not enough cash. So I want to make sure that you all understand that it's not going to be like the 994 vouchers. Today you can go into a deficit and those things will still continue to pay. It will not be that way with 789. You must have adequate cash, and if there is not adequate cash, they will fail budget checking. And if you need to make those payments quickly, you're going to have to be able to reconcile that account, just like you do with your operating funds, to understand why you don't have adequate cash. So these differences will require agencies to be proactive in reconciling the 789 class fund timely, submit stat cancel payments to unclaimed property, and understand the requirements for transmitting these vouchers. All right, so as far as understanding what we need to do for transmitting these vouchers that were formerly 994 vouchers, we've tried to make the changes required to transmit the 789 vouchers as seamless as possible, but there are some fields that require certain values. Column 1, for all the records, that's the header, the payee, and the funding records, are still going to be A, since the class fund begins with a 7. The header column 64 should be a type of W, just like it is for the 994 vouchers today. But although these claims with the W did not previously require the department ID, these vouchers must include the department ID of 8900001 because of the budget checking rules. The payee column 208 should populate either a P for the print check, I for interagency payments, such as when you're paying teachers' retirements or OLRs or OPRs, and E for EFT payments if you've got the banking information in your vendor file. So depending on which type of payment method, then that column 64, the header column 64 of W, should work with the combination of the payee column 208 payment types. The voucher from remote code is going to contain 2 additional edits. First, it will allow the 789 claims to interface only with account codes beginning with the 585, except for 585060, which is that net payroll, 585-110, which is the federal income tax withheld, 585-120, which is the FICA employer share, 585-125, which is the FICA employee's share, 585-130, which is the employer's Medicare share, and 585-135, which is the Medicare employee share. Additionally, the vouchers from remote code now is going to disallow the 633XXX accounts to interface with class funds other than 994. So that means that you can't be trying to submit claims with 994 with account codes that begin with 585, or you can't submit something with 994 and account codes class fund 7XX. So it needs to and then the other thing is that you really need to do is make sure that your cutoff for the 2016 payroll that we submit the right class fundings and the right account codes. So back in the day when we went from the class fund 993 to the class fund 994, if anybody was here back in 2004, there were a lot of things that were sent in incorrectly, where 2004 payroll was still coming in with 993 and vice versa. So make sure that you all have procedures in place. So for that December 1st payroll, when you submit those vouchers from remote, that you are sending them in with the 585 account codes with the class fund 789. And for those of you still making those December 2015 payments, that you are submitting those with the 994 class fund with the 633 account codes. Okay, very important, and especially very important now that we are budget checking the 789s more stringently, so that if it doesn't have an adequate cash, you're going to have things that will not budget check, and you're going to be scrambling to try and figure out how to make those types of payments. All right, so lastly, what we're going to talk about now are some of the accounts payable report changes that we're making. And because net pay is sensitive, we are in the process of changing a few key accounts payable reports that list detailed transactions. Most of these reports that we're changing are going to sum the net payroll transactions by accounting date or payment date, depending on the report. And the report is going to report it as a one-line item. The OMES Form 15A voucher jacket report is going to exclude these vouchers altogether from selecting, and they will not be required to be printed and signed. So some of the reports that we are currently working on right now include the 6-digit expenditure detail by journal date report, the successful voucher report, the miscellaneous warrant report, the reconciled miscellaneous warrant report, the fiscal year-to-date AP transaction report, the OCP All-Trans AP query, and the OCP expenditure vouchers SR&D query. We are also still reviewing other reports and queries to determine if there are others that should be changed. Although we would like to have this completed by December 10th, there may be reports that are not completed by this time just because of the short time frame. There are public queries out there that begin with the word regents that list expenditures, and since these queries prompt by accounting date rather than journal date, and because we have expenditure reports that tie to the ledger, we will be removing these queries prior to the December 10th go live date from production. For those who do need the detail, would actually need to see the net payroll detail for each voucher or payment, then we will be providing private queries to those who are authorized to run them. So you'll just need to send me an email of the user ID that needs those, and then I will just copy those to those people. All right, so here's an example of the report. Now, we're still working on this. It's not quite complete, but this is the one that we have completed mostly, and this is the miscellaneous warrant report. And so I've just included it here to give you kind of a look of how the transactions will be summed and reported. So there at the very bottom where I've got the box highlighted, it says there that it has the, for the payment group, it just has not applicable. For the payment or the bank account, the bank accounts for these are going to be your agency number with a P after your agency number. And then you're just going to have that vendor ID with the higher ed payroll. And then in this case, we just summed some vouchers. I just entered some vouchers just to test this to this particular report. So it wasn't anything that was tested. This report does not really show what was actually tested by the agency, but it was just some things that I was doing prior to that. So there's the $4,040 there that I had created, 2 or 3 different vouchers. The row above it that I've grayed out, just ignore it. We're still working on trying to modify this, revamp it a little bit. So there was something that wasn't reporting quite correctly on it, but we still hadn't gotten completed for me to give you a good print screen. Also note that the 3 transactions that are above it in the special pay group, those were just 3 vouchers that I entered in to make sure that this report was going to report correctly. Those are reports for the payroll deductions. So those are still going to be listed on the reports. It's just the vouchers with the vendor ID of all of the 1111 that are still going to just report the sum total amounts there. So, all right. So at this time, are there any questions for accounts payable? Yes, ma'am.
On slide 32, could you tell me again what was incorrect on that slide?
Okay, so for slide 32 there, on that second row, it says that 7XX vouchers do not stat cancel. That is incorrect. They do stat cancel, but they stat cancel back to the agency, meaning that you do get your money correctly. And then where I say 789 vouchers will stat cancel back to the agency, that is incorrect. 78 vouchers will stat cancel, and the money is placed into the stat cancel fund. So that requires then a 20R in order for us to reissue. So I apologize. I got that backwards.
Is it really a 7 reg instead of, because if they use an OST on a 7,
Okay, so what Jenny is reminding me of then is that when you submit those are going to say 7 reg, but the vouchers from remote does automatically populate that for them. So theirs always comes in as 7 reg. So for your vouchers, your 7XX, you'll always get your money back.
But the 789 vouchers, you're saying it now, though, if they're canceled by statute, we have to send the money to unclaimed property.
Either reissue it to the employee or yes, send it to unclaimed property.
Okay. How
Well,
long after?
Let's go back. Are you talking 789, the net
Yes.
pays?
Yeah. Well, it's saying institutions are responsible for reissuing or sending funds to unclaimed property in the 789 fund. In other words, if I sent a check was refunding an employee, let's say their health insurance that we withheld and they quit and they need their money back, if they never canceled that check, it goes back into 789.
Okay, so
And if I can't contact them or get it reissued, then I have to send it to unclaimed property.
Okay, 789 vouchers will stat cancel to the stat cancel fund.
Okay.
You never send anything to unclaimed property that's stat cancel to the stat cancel fund.
Okay,
700
so-
fund warrants that stat cancel back to the agency. If you do not find the appropriate place to send those, you send those to unclaimed property, but not 789.
Okay, so she's got this
Yes.
needs to go up under 700.
Right, yes, I need to redo this slide, and I
we
do
were
apologize.
already supposed to be doing that?
The state, the 700 fund, because they are like ASA checks, the state has never put those in unclaimed property. It has always been the responsibility of the university, if those checks are not delivered or cashed, to handle them appropriately. And state law requires that if you owe somebody money, you can't find them after a certain amount of time, that money goes to unclaimed property. Now, if it's a check issued in error and it should have never been paid, or if you reissued under another check out of your 700 fund, then of course you wouldn't send it to unclaimed property.
What's the timeline on that? Is it still 7 years? Or
I don't know because I don't deal with that.
5 years.
5 years.
5 years?
And I don't know whether agencies are doing that with their clearing and ASA accounts.
So you have to do like an escheat report and send it to the state with the money?
There again, I'm not familiar with that.
I mean, I can get that information from our unclaimed property division for you guys and let you know what the timing on that is.
Did you write that?
Any other questions? Okay.
So are there any questions over anything other than accounts payable or anything that we've presented today that we need to get somebody to respond? We want to be as helpful as possible to you in this time of transition, and so if we can...
Can I have a quick, I've heard that like 994 will be available to the end of the fiscal year so that we can clean it out. Is that correct?
It will be available, and for some agencies, it'll be available even longer than that because there are some timing differences that require it to go into the next the next calendar year. So we would be requesting that it be reconciled and cleared up. Now, we'll probably be monitoring it, and if they aren't being cleaned up, then we're going to ask for it. Now, usually when I do audits of the institutions, I usually ask for reconciliation. Some agencies or some higher eds are able to provide them, and then others are not. So those that haven't reconciled need to start really reconciling them, especially if they're a deficit. And if they are a deficit and you're not able to reconcile them, then you must be prepared to cover them from that deficit from the operating funds.
So as a reminder, be sure that you do send an email to Ayana Wilkins. That's AYANA.Wilkins, WILKINS, at omes.ok.gov with a list of who attended either remotely or on site and what your positions are so that she can get that information to the security group to allow for your accesses to be allowed. If you do not send that, your user ID will not be turned on and you will have to attend a journal entry training. Sherry, do you have anything? I think we had a question. Did somebody start to ask something?
I have one at East Central. When will the next training be?
Journal entry training?
Yes.
Those are not scheduled on a regular basis. They're scheduled on an as-needed basis. Because this is a new access that agencies haven't had. This was to cover most of the higher ed conversions. What we may have to do is schedule another training at a later date for higher ed only, as those are handled on a one-on-one training right now for the clearing access.
Jenny, we are recording this and it will be posted. If they do it online, could that also can be considered part of their training at a later time?
Yes, if it is posted and you review it online, just be sure to notify us of that fact so that we can notify security.
If you already have a user ID with the JE to sign on and do journal entries, do you need to do additional forms for access to do it for the 789, or will you already have?
You already have access.
Okay.
Well, thank you to everyone for coming and listening in. As I said, we are working very hard to make this transition as smooth as possible, and we know it's painful on all fronts, and we acknowledge that, and we want to do everything we can to help you make that transition. So I'll turn it back to Sherry.
Okay, just a quick reminder, and I'm sorry I had to step out for a minute, so I'm not sure if Jenny mentioned this, but they still are in testing mode, and so they are expecting each institution to upload files during the testing period. And so if your institution has not done that, please make arrangements to do that as quickly as possible. If not, you'll be hearing from Lisa probably pretty quickly, but we need to make sure those files are working and that you're getting your processes uploaded. So that is important, as well as your budget revision. Enter your budget revisions for your 789 Department 89-00001.
And remember, when you're sending your files for testing, and Patricia may want to address a little of that, there is an edit. You could submit it in an edit mode, and I'll let her address that a little bit.
Yes, so on our higher ed PFT fund and 500 MIS, actually I have a print screen of it. Oops. Okay, so here's the actual first half of that page. There is a field there that says file transfer method, attach, or FTP, and then across the way is the process mode. You can do an edit or an update. So we suggest that you start with the edit, and all it does then is it generates reports to show whether or not you're successful, whether there's any errors. We have a lot of different edits in there, and I think in the documentation that was sent out, the instructions is how to go ahead and either upload or attach a report that it shows you all the different the different edits then that for the different processes that could be incorrect. So start with your edits, and if you have problems with that, just contact us. We'll help you with them. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory. Others you may have questions about, and then you would go ahead and update. Once you update, then you'll want to run the PFT validate form to make sure that everything is showing it correctly, and then at that point we take it. You'll email me or Monica Cox, who's sitting in the back there, and then we will get in touch with Elsa or Catherine Edge, and then they continue on, and we continue running the processes. So we're still testing those vouchers and some other processes. So for those of you who have submitted, I think I wasn't here either Friday or yesterday, but as of Thursday night, I think there was about 5 agencies that had submitted. And so they have not heard back from us, and that's because we're still looking at those vouchers and testing some things. So we're still finding some things that we're still needing our developers to change.
All right. Well, thank you for coming again, and let us know if you have any questions. We would rather hear from you now than hear from you later. So, thanks.
I think that's it. I think that's all the training.
I worked on foundation mailing lists. Yeah.
But at least you're saying it's in the.
I will say that's one good thing about the chamber stuff. Like, man, there's several people that I see or we interact with that have not built into the flyer for that.
Send that. Okay, when we send the 500 miss and the PFT, that moves the cash.
Every time I upload a payroll, it always shows a deficit on the 730. On the what? 730. On payroll processing. See, and that's just it. Tina and I filled out those forms, and then Jenny Pratt called Tina the other day and said, I really don't think I'll need all this access. Tina was like, well, I don't know. It was last Wednesday. We were headed to the 3 o'clock meeting. Tina's like, we haven't, or no, we were, yeah, 3 o'clock meeting. Tina's like, I'm sorry, we have a meeting. Can I call you back? So it was Friday, and Tina calls her back, and she's like, well, what do you,
Tell us
tell us what we need then. And she goes, well, you only need the stuff under the miscellaneous. And we said, okay. Well, then we're back and forth with Tim yesterday. I'm like, can you two not communicate? Tim and Jeannie not communicate? I mean, because we're getting emails from Tim and Jeannie going, well, this and that and this and that. Well, we got this form. So I think I'm going to just call both of them or send an email to both of them today and just say, what do we need?
Tell us what the hell we need.
I don't know what, I don't know for sure what all I'm gonna be doing, what I need to do, what I'm supposed to do.
And it's not like they don't have 50 or 100 of these agencies out there needing the same damn thing.
Exactly, and Jeannie said, well, I think people will request more than what they really need. Well, okay, I understand that,